Chuck, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you. It's great to have you. I want to just get right to this. What's going on here with what we're hearing in the media, what we saw in the New York Times yesterday or the day before, the Washington Post, is that the post office is going broke. It turns out that this is, to the extent that this is true, it is because of a piece of poison pill legislation in 2006 that was promoted by Tom DeLay, Dennis Hastert, and Tom Davis, all Republican politicians who took large campaign contributions from the United Postal Service, or the Parcel Service, rather, UPS, among others. What's the deal here? What is this legislation? What's the bizarre circumstance that the United States Postal Service has to deal with that no other government agency or corporation has to deal with?
Yes, Tom. Well, what this legislation did is it mandated that the Postal Service, I mean, it's hard to understand this. It's not even logical, but to fully pre-fund future retirees' health benefits for the next 75 years, and it had to be done within a 10-year window. The bottom line, go ahead.
So through this 10-year window, which we're halfway through right now, we are paying for the benefits of people who have not yet even been born, much less gone to work for the post office. Typically, retirees are getting benefits that they themselves paid in for. But these workers right now are paying for the retirement benefits of people who have not yet been born. Do I have that right?
Yes, so the Postal Service, every September 30th, when they talk about a $5.5 billion payment that the Postal Service says it can't make, it's this particular payment.
Wow.
That means that the Postal Service, before they sell one stamp or one money order, it's $5.5 billion in the hole every year. This was created with no logical sense for the benefit of the Postal Service or the American people. What it did is it put this tremendous weight on the Postal Service. So when they talk about the Postal Service losing money, that's a big lie. In fact, even with email and even with the economic collapse in 2008, the Postal Service would be fine. There would be no need to close post offices, cut back on services, and lay off hundreds of thousands of workers.
Right. So why did this piece of legislation had a very friendly name to it, something like the Postal Reconciliation Act or whatever. It had a
Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act,
right,
of 2006.
And when Denny Hastert brought it to a vote, he said, "All say aye. All in favor say aye." Lots of people said aye. All the nays. There weren't that many nays. He says it's passed. Typically, somebody then at that point stands up and says, "I want a roll call vote," so there's a record of who voted how. But Denny Hastert chose not to do that, either because they were trying to slip something through or because everybody thought, hey, this is just some pro forma, like naming a post office kind of thing. What was the deal here? I mean, this poison, were there people warning about this at the time, or did Congress get snookered?
Well, I think Congress and a large part of the American people and media were snookered. The American Postal Workers Union, my national union, we opposed it from the get-go. We saw the problems ahead, but this went through. It was the last day of the session of that Congress. People voted on this thing, and they went home for Christmas. That's what it was about. That's what was taking place. And it went through, and now at that time, people thought, well, the Postal Service at that point was running in the black. It could absorb this. But then with the economic collapse of 2008, it really put it behind the eight ball and is the sole reason that this crisis is supposedly taking place right now. In addition to this, over the decades, the Postal Service has overpaid the employee share into the civil service retirement system to the tune of at least $50 billion. This was the figure that the audit by the Postal Regulatory Commission, they did an independent audit, and they said $50 to $60 billion overpayment. The Postal Service should be credited that money immediately, which would eliminate all these financial problems by paying off every year the $5.5 billion for the rest of that requirement.
Right.
And then the additional money of that 50 to 60 billion could pay down the debt, modernize the Postal Service, and make a 236-year-old institution even be stronger.
Right. So we're talking with Chuck Zlatkin. He's the legislative and political director of the New York Metro Area Postal Union, the APWU of the AFL-CIO. And the big picture here is that conservatives and to some extent, and Republicans enthusiastically, and to some extent the national media are buying into this notion that the post office is dying and needs to go through radical transformations and possibly even death in order to be saved. This is going to inure tremendous benefit to UPS and FedEx. And given that there are now, we're talking billions and billions of dollars in pension funds and health benefits, it may also produce enormous benefits for Wall Street. We have another manufactured crisis here. And so, Chuck, first of all, before we get to what can be done about it, we've got about 2 minutes left here. There is a piece of legislation that will fix. I'm sorry, we have 1 minute left. There's a piece of legislation that will fix this. What should people be calling their representatives and calling for?
Okay, H.R. 1351, which will reconcile the overpayment to the future debt and basically free up the $5.5 billion a year to the Postal Service. H.R. 1351, introduced by Stephen Lynch, right now, as of today, has 193 co-sponsors, Democrats and some Republicans. I would suggest everybody to call up their congressional representative, and if they haven't signed on as a co-sponsor, suggest that they do. Because if we get to 218 co-sponsors, that means the majority of the Congress is co-sponsoring. And how can the Republican chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, Darrell Issa, prevent it from coming to a vote? That's
right.
What we need. We need everybody to call their congressional representatives today and say support 1351, H.R. 1351, and bring it to the floor for a vote.
And Darrell Issa right now is the guy who's blocking this thing up, right?
Yes, he has another piece of legislation that would basically destroy the Postal Service. He calls it a Reform Act. Basically, it should be called the Wisconsining of the Postal Service Act, because that's what he's trying to do.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Absolutely amazing. Chuck Zlatkin, APWU.org. But call your member of Congress, H.R. 1351. Call Congress.org has the phone numbers. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Tom.